It was this past Christmas, and the holiday rush was in full swing. I'd managed to check off most of my shopping list, but one thing still nagged at me. I needed a gift for my 4-year-old cousin. She wasn't hard to shop for, thankfully. Like most kids her age, she adored colorful, cheery cartoons, Peppa Pig, My Little Pony, and especially Max and Ruby. She used to watch Max and Ruby religiously, and that's where my idea sparked. A DVD set of her favorite show seemed like the perfect gift. But it was Christmas, and naturally, every online store was either sold out or only offered used copies I couldn't trust. I scoured eBay but grew more frustrated with each listing. It felt like I was hitting a dead end. That was until the package arrived. I was still scrolling through listings when I heard a soft clink from the letterbox. My dog perked up, and I rushed to grab the envelope before it turned into a chew toy. The package was strange. The wrapping paper was crinkled and greasy, dotted with faint stains that looked suspiciously like fingerprints. My instincts said to toss it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a Max and Ruby DVD. But not the kind you'd find on a store shelf. The cover looked homemade, as though a child had scrawled it in marker. 2 crude figures vaguely resembling Max and Ruby stared back at me. No logo, no official branding, just the title, Max and Ruby. On the back was a list of episodes, labeled in the most uninspired way possible: Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, Episode 4. Against my better judgment, I popped the DVD into my player. To my surprise, the episodes played perfectly. The picture quality was pristine, without a single glitch or artifact. The only odd thing was the episode menu. It was a plain white screen with black text listing the episodes as Max and Ruby 1, Max and Ruby 2, and so on. No music, no animations, just silence. I figured the plainness of it didn't matter. I printed a new cover I found online to make the DVD look more presentable, added proper episode titles, and called it a day. My cousin wouldn't know the difference. Christmas came and went, and my cousin was delighted with her gift. She hadn't had the chance to watch it yet, but that changed on Boxing Day. The family had gone out to dinner, leaving me home alone to babysit. I figured it was the perfect opportunity to let her watch the DVD. I slid the disc into the player, set her up in the living room, and left her to enjoy it while I grabbed my dinner from the kitchen. The episodes played one after the other: Episode 1, Episode 2, then Episode 3. I could hear the cheerful voices of the characters bouncing through the house. I was finishing off my noodles when the atmosphere shifted. Something felt off. I was halfway through my dinner when I heard it, a blood-curdling scream coming from the living room. My cousin. The plate slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor, but I didn't care. I sprinted to the living room, heart pounding, only to find her curled up on the floor, wailing in terror. "Hey! What's wrong?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She was inconsolable, her little body trembling as she pointed toward the TV. My gaze shifted, and what I saw made my stomach twist into knots. On the screen were Max and Ruby, but something was horribly wrong. They stood in complete darkness, their usual cheerful faces gone. In their place were smooth, empty voids, no mouths, no noses, just cavernous, black holes where their eyes should have been. The once bright colors of the show had been replaced with sickly, blood-red hues, and the faint crackle of static buzzed behind a twisted version of the Max and Ruby theme song, playing backward. I couldn't move. My breath caught in my throat as the image lingered for what felt like an eternity, 20 seconds at least. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, the screen went black. The DVD player clicked, powering off by itself. That alone made my skin crawl. DVDs don't just turn off. I turned my attention back to my cousin, trying to soothe her. "It's okay. It's not real," I whispered, rocking her gently until her sobs turned to hiccups, and eventually, she fell asleep on the couch. But deep down, I knew what I had seen was real. Too real. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was my parents. They told me they'd be out all night and not to wait up. As soon as I hung up, I turned my attention back to the DVD. My hands trembled as I slipped it into my laptop, determined to figure out what was wrong with it. The menu loaded, and that's when I noticed something that froze me in place. Episode 4 had a new title, R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy. A cold shiver ran down my spine. With my cousin fast asleep, I grabbed my earbuds, plugged them in, and hit play. The episode began innocently enough. Max and Ruby were outside, playing tag in their yard while their parents watched from the porch. But something was off, terribly off. The audio was reversed, a distorted mess of sounds that made my skin crawl. And then there were their parents' faces. Their usual cheerful expressions were gone, replaced by profound sadness. As I watched, a film grain effect appeared on the screen, growing heavier with each passing second. The camera panned to the parents, and in a voice so deep and sorrowful it was almost guttural, the father said, "It's such a shame." He sighed heavily, the sound cutting abruptly to static. Then came the scream. It was loud, piercing, and agonizingly real. I ripped my earbuds out, clutching my chest as the sound was replaced by horrifying gurgling, like someone choking. In the background, I could hear the parents murmuring, but their words were indecipherable. The screen flashed white for a split second before transitioning to an image of Max and Ruby standing solemnly in front of a gravestone. The marker read, "R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy." Neither Max nor Ruby had faces anymore, just blank, featureless heads staring into the void. The static droned on faintly in the background as the screen lingered on the scene. It didn't move. Didn't cut away. Just Max and Ruby and the gravestone. It stayed like that for over a minute before the screen finally went black. The screen flickered again, and the scene shifted. Max and Ruby sat in Ruby's dimly lit room, their small figures trembling as they sobbed uncontrollably. Their cries were drowned by a rising tide of whispers, indecipherable at first, but growing louder and more sinister with every passing second. The whispers multiplied, swirling around the room, until one single voice, a woman's voice, full of rage, rose above the rest. Her words hit like a hammer, "Burn in hell." My pulse raced, but I couldn't look away. The screen began flashing with unsettling imagery, transparent clips of violence, played in reverse, intercut with Max and Ruby's despair. I could see the father pulling a knife out of his own neck, his movements grotesquely reversed, before picking up a bloodied axe. He hacked at the mangled corpse of the mother, whose body twitched unnaturally, as though life were returning to her. Then the scene twisted further, he ascended the stairs, his steps deliberate and menacing. The whispers grew louder still, until they converged into an eerie silence. The screen faded and then showed something I can only describe as grotesque and heart-wrenching. Max was now alone in his room. A noose hung from the ceiling, and he stood on a chair beneath it. He slipped the rope around his neck, his face expressionless. The scene lingered just long enough to suffocate me with dread before the screen turned black. Static roared through my earbuds, sharp and piercing, and then Ruby appeared. She walked into the room and froze at the sight of her brother. Her scream was visceral, gut-wrenching. The camera zoomed in on her face, and I could see her eyes, her real eyes, filled with horror. For 5 agonizing minutes, the screen stayed on her anguished expression, the choking sound of Max behind her fading into the static. When it finally cut to black, I exhaled shakily. But it wasn't over. The scene returned to Ruby sitting alone in the garden. She was beside 2 gravestones, one marked R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy, the other R.I.P. Brother. Her head tilted downward, and then she slowly looked directly at the screen. Her eyes glowed with an eerie blue light as she spoke, her voice flat but chilling. "Whoever's watching this is because you never watched any of me and my brother's episodes. One day, you will regret this." The screen went black again, and I thought it was over. But the Max and Ruby theme began to play, slowly, eerily, and the screen flickered back to life. It was the same horrifying image I'd seen before, Max and Ruby, faceless and standing in darkness. But this time, there was text above them, stark and final, "Death is our only release." There were no credits, no sound, nothing else. The DVD finally ejected itself from my laptop. My hands trembled as I stared at it, my stomach churning with fear and nausea. I didn't think. I acted. I grabbed the DVD and shattered it, breaking it into as many pieces as I could before flushing the shards down the drain. I wanted it gone, erased from existence. I thought it was over. The next few days passed uneventfully. I had nightmares about what I'd seen, but I told myself it was done. My cousin went back home, and my life returned to some semblance of normal. Until tonight. It was late. My parents were out for dinner, leaving me alone in the house. I was watching TV when I heard it again, the faint sound of something being pushed through the letterbox. My chest tightened as I approached the door. Lying on the floor was a neatly folded piece of paper. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and unfolded it. In bold, unmistakable writing, it read, "Death is our only release."